Vanessa thought she was drawing the line when she told me the family cruise was only for successful people. She had no idea I owned the yacht, the charter company, and the rules she was about to live under. By sunset, her luxury vacation would become my lesson in consequences. "This cruise is strictly for the successful members of the family," Vanessa said, taking a slow sip of her oat milk latte. Her eyes drifted pointedly across my living room, lingering on the slightly worn leather armchairs. My son Calvin stared at the floor, completely silent, as usual. It was a brisk Tuesday morning in Boston, and the two of them had shown up uninvited for breakfast, supposedly to tell me about their vacation plans. In reality, Vanessa was just boundary marking her boundaries, that is. "I'm Eleanor. I'm 67, a widow of 5 years, and the kind of woman who prefers to observe closely rather than make a lot of noise. My late husband and I spent decades building a mid-sized logistics company, which I quietly sold off 2 years ago. Calvin knew there was money, but I'd always kept the exact scale of my finances discreet. To Vanessa, I was just the aging widow living in a modest brick house, probably ready for assisted living. We're flying out to Miami tomorrow to board the Serenity," Vanessa continued, her voice dripping with cool arrogance. "It's an exclusive private yacht charter. We figured a trip like that would be way too exhausting for you, Eleanor. You're better off staying put." She tossed a glossy brochure onto the table, showcasing the magnificent vessel. What she didn't know was that the yacht was held by a parent company where I am the sole shareholder. It was my latest investment. I didn't feel the urge to cry or argue. Instead, I calmly took a sip of my tea and looked over the brochure. Calvin still wouldn't look me in the eye. Vanessa's play was obvious. She wanted to isolate me and put me in my place as the unnecessary matriarch. But rather than defend myself, I made a very practical decision right then and there. Vanessa had no idea I was already 3 steps ahead of her. After the two of them left, I washed the breakfast dishes in total peace. No tears, no rush. My mind was completely clear. Calvin and Vanessa thought they could treat me like a piece of old furniture left to gather dust. But the money funding this luxurious vacation came largely from the monthly $2,500 allowance I'd been sending Calvin to help out his allegedly struggling real estate business. I sat down at my desk and logged into my bank account. It was time for some immediate adjustments. With a few clicks, I canceled the recurring transfer. If I wasn't successful enough to be included in their family, my money didn't need to be either. Next, I called my asset manager to pull up the charter agreement for the Serenity. Vanessa had booked the charter through a boutique agency in Miami that was part of my investment portfolio. She had put down a hefty $20,000 deposit, which according to the strict terms and conditions was completely non-refundable. I had the booking details forwarded to my email. There it was, in black and white. Primary charterer, Vanessa Cross. She had reserved the ultra-exclusive master suite, eager to flaunt it on her social media. That evening, I packed a sleek, understated suitcase and booked a first-class flight to Miami for the following morning. It was time to take a vacation of my own, no invitation required. As I turned off the hallway lights, I felt completely at ease. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day in Florida, and Vanessa's picture-perfect world was about to show its first cracks. The Miami sky was a brilliant blue, and a warm ocean breeze welcomed me the moment I stepped out of the airport. I took a car service straight to the exclusive marina. During the ride, I thought about all the years I'd stepped back for the sake of the family. Calvin had changed so much under Vanessa's influence. The grateful son had turned into a man who measured a person's worth entirely by their bank account. When I walked onto the docks, I spotted the Serenity instantly rocking gently in the turquoise water. She was a masterpiece of modern naval architecture, 180 feet of pure elegance. Down on the pier, I saw the two of them. Vanessa was posing for photos, in an expensive designer silk dress while Calvin fumbled awkwardly with a bottle of champagne. They looked like extras in a movie they didn't understand. I walked down the wooden dock with measured, steady steps. My sunglasses shielded my eyes from the glare, and my scarf was perfectly styled. As the heel of my shoes clicked against the planks, Vanessa spun around. Her smile vanished the second she recognized me. Her eyes widened in a mix of utter disbelief and pure irritation. "Eleanor, what on earth are you doing here?" Vanessa barked across the dock, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This area is strictly private. You're disrupting our departure." Calvin turned around, too, nearly dropping his glass. I didn't say a word. I just kept walking toward them, offering a mild, polite smile. The confrontation had officially begun, and I held every single card. "Security!" Vanessa called out shrilly, waving frantically at one of the marina staff members. "We have an unauthorized person on the dock." The guard, a young man in a crisp white uniform, walked over quickly. He looked from Vanessa to me, and his expression instantly shifted into one of deep respect. He recognized me from my previous corporate visits to the marina. "Good morning, Mrs. Cross," the guard said politely, giving me a slight nod. "Is there a problem here?" Vanessa let out a triumphant scoff. "Yes, this older woman is harassing us. This is a private charter yacht for successful people. She doesn't belong here." The guard offered a cool, professional smile. "Actually, ma'am, Mrs. Cross is the owner of this yacht and the entire charter company. She has total access at all times." Vanessa's heavily contoured face completely dropped. "What? That's ridiculous. We rented this yacht and paid a fortune through Vanguard Charters." She stammered, all the color draining from her face. Calvin just stood there, his mouth slightly open, completely speechless. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves against the yacht's hull. I reached into my handbag and pulled out the electronic key fob linked to the yacht's master security system. With a soft, elegant beep, the gangway lights flickered on and the ship's engines hummed to life in the background. "This can't be happening," Calvin whispered under his breath. I looked at him devoid of anger, but with absolute certainty. "You were right, Vanessa," I said calmly, stepping onto the gangway. "You did rent this yacht through my agency, and that $20,000 deposit you put down is, as you know, completely non-refundable." Vanessa swallowed hard, looking like she was on the verge of fainting. The boarding passes she had been holding so proudly literally slipped through her fingers, fluttering down onto the wooden dock. Right on cue, the yacht's crew appeared on deck, looking immaculate in their uniforms. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Cross," the captain said clearly, completely bypassing my son and daughter-in-law. "The master suite is ready for you, Pai, just as you requested over the phone last night." Vanessa's eyes followed the captain as if he had just handed down a prison sentence. "But I booked the master suite," Vanessa protested, her voice reaching a desperate pitch. "I paid for it." I turned around on the deck and looked down at her. "You rented a vessel, Vanessa, but as the owner, I reserve the right to adjust the cabin assignments at my own discretion. The master suite is mine. For the two of you, we have a different arrangement." I nodded to the chief steward, who held out 2 new cabin key cards. He handed them to Calvin, who took them like a scolded schoolboy. "You'll be staying in the starboard cabin on the lower deck, right next to the engine room," I explained smoothly. "It's tight, but functional. For guests who rely on my money to pretend they're successful, it's more than enough. To everyone who spends time with us here at Quiet Revenge, thank you. Our channel shares stories about family betrayal, resilience, loss, forgiveness, and the quiet strength people discover during life's hardest moments. While AI tools may assist with certain parts of the creative process, every story is carefully selected, reviewed, edited, fact-checked, and produced by our team with great care and attention. Because our channel currently has limited monetization, Viewer support helps us continue creating these stories and improving the channel for our community. If Quiet Revenge has ever brought you comfort, reflection, or companionship, please consider supporting us with the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family, co-fi https://co-fi.com/The Story Family, PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/PayPalMe/Kunhuangmin. Thank you for being part of this community. Vanessa was shaking with anger. We don't have to take this. Calvin, do something. We're canceling this whole thing and renting another boat. I let out a soft, dry chuckle. In Miami. During peak season, good luck with that, Vanessa. Besides, you might want to keep a close eye on your budget. Calvin, did you happen to check your bank account this morning? Calvin hurriedly pulled his phone out of his pocket. His fingers trembled as he opened his banking app. I watched his face closely. First came the confusion, then absolute panic. Mom, the monthly transfer, the $2,500 isn't there, he stammered, looking up at me with wide, pleading eyes. Vanessa snatched the phone right out of his hand to see it for herself. Shh. I figured since the two of you are so successful and this cruise is meant only for the high achievers of the family, you wouldn't be needing my monthly assistance anymore, I said with unshakable calm. A successful real estate agent like you, Calvin, should easily be able to fund his own vacations. It's only logical, right? Vanessa's arrogance completely vanished. It finally sunk in that her entire lifestyle, her expensive dress, and her carefully curated luxury image were built on a foundation I could dismantle at any moment. They had written me off as a weak, lonely widow they could push aside. Now they realized that without me, they had nothing. That's not fair, Eleanor, Vanessa cried out, real desperation creeping into her voice for the first time. We were just trying to look out for you. A cruise like this is way too stressful for someone your age. I walked over to the railing and looked down at them. Save the excuses. You excluded me because you thought I wasn't high class enough for your circle. Well, now you see who actually owns the ship. Just then, a small group of local photographers approached the pier. Earlier that morning, I had notified my company's PR team that the owner would be personally boarding the Serenity today. The cameras began flashing. Vanessa instinctively tried to pose and angle herself, but the photographers ignored her completely, keeping their lenses trained directly on me. Mrs. Cross, a quick photo for the Boston Business Journal, one of them shouted. I waved politely and smiled for the cameras. Calvin and Vanessa stood off to the side like two uninvited extras caught in the frame. Vanessa's face turned from a flush of anger to a pale, ghostly white. She understood the social game being played here all too well. You have two choices right now, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the deck so the crew could hear. You can come aboard except the lower deck cabin and keep a completely low profile. Or you can walk away right now, forfeit your massive deposit, and explain to all your friends back home why there won't be any luxury yacht photos on your feed. Vanessa looked around frantically. The cameras kept clicking, and a few neighboring yacht owners were already glancing over, amused by the scene. She had no moves left. If she walked away now, her reputation among her high society crowd in Boston would be permanently ruined. She swallowed her pride, looked down at her shoes, and gave a faint nod. It was the total surrender of a woman who thought she was untouchable. We'll stay, she whispered, barely audible. I turned to the steward. Excellent. Take their bags down to the lower cabin, and please hand them their appropriate attire. Vanessa looked up, startled. Attire? What attire? The steward offered a professional smile. Per Mrs. Cross's policy, guests staying in the lower deck tier wear the official apparel of our charter line while underway. He handed Vanessa and Calvin a pair of folded packages containing basic navy blue polo shirts branded with my company's logo. It was the standard uniform usually reserved for the deckhands. Vanessa stared at the cheap cotton shirt as if it were coated in venom. It looked like she wouldn't be needing her designer silk dress on this trip after all. Calvin took his package without a single word of protest and walked up the gangway with his head down. Vanessa followed him with heavy, defeated steps, every ounce of her previous swagger entirely gone. They had shown up at my house thinking they could control and humiliate me. Now they were prisoners of their own vanity on my ship. The Serenity departed right on schedule. The powerful engines vibrated softly as we cleared the Miami marina and set a course for the deep blue of the open ocean. I sat out on the aft deck in a plush lounge chair, sipping a glass of fresh squeezed orange juice and taking in the absolute quiet. For the first time in years, I felt completely light and unburdened. About an hour later, Calvin came up to the deck alone. He was wearing the navy polo, which was noticeably too tight around his shoulders. He sat down a respectful distance away in an empty chair, staring out at the wake of the boat. He looked exactly like the little boy he used to be, the one who knew he'd made a massive mistake. I kept quiet, letting him sit in the awkward silence for a while. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he finally said quietly, keeping his eyes on the water. "Vanessa, she pushed for this, but I never should have let it happen. I should have stood up to her." I turned my head slowly to look at him. "You're a grown man, Calvin. You made the conscious choice to trade your mother away for the illusion of status. That was your decision, not Vanessa's." He gave a heavy, remorseful nod. "What's going to happen now with the allowance with us?" I looked back out at the horizon. "The monthly checks are done. From now on, you live on what you actually earn. If you get your life together and start acting like a son again, we can talk about rebuilding a relationship. But from here on out, I set the terms." By evening, the yacht was anchored peacefully in a secluded scenic cove off Key West. I enjoyed an exquisite dinner served directly to my table by the ship's private chef. Vanessa and Calvin stayed down in their tiny cabin near the engine room the entire day. They finally understood that any attempt to push back or regain leverage was completely useless. The boundaries had been drawn permanently. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from my bank confirming the latest quarterly dividend drop from my logistics holdings. My life was structured, my wealth was secure, and my boundaries were clearer than they had ever been. I didn't need a team of lawyers, loud shouting matches, or petty dramatic schemes to command respect. Simple, decisive action was all it took. Standing at the railing, later that night, looking up at the stars, reflecting over the Atlantic, I felt a deep, profound sense of peace. Success really was the best answer to cruelty. But success paired with absolute control over your own life, that was priceless. Calvin and Vanessa were going to remember this cruise for the rest of their lives. The Serenity glided smoothly through the dark water, and I knew that tomorrow would bring a beautiful fresh start. My life belonged entirely to me again, and no one would ever make the mistake of calling me irrelevant. The journey was just beginning. To everyone who spends time with us here at Quiet Revenge, thank you. Our channel shares stories about family betrayal, resilience, loss, forgiveness, and the quiet strength people discover during life's hardest moments. While AI tools may assist with certain parts of the creative process, every story is carefully selected, reviewed, edited, fact-checked, and produced by our team with great care and attention. Because our channel currently has limited monetization viewer support, helps us continue creating these stories and improving the channel for our community. If Quiet Revenge has ever brought you comfort, reflection, or companionship, please consider supporting us with the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https:// www.patreon.com/quiet-revenge-family. Ko-fi, https://ko-fi.com/the-story-family PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/paypalme/Kanhuangmin. Thank you for being part of this community.